As I think about this passage, as I was praying about it this week, I was thinking about a friend of mine. A friend who, for years now, keeps getting jobs promised to him. And not just any jobs, but like dream jobs. The jobs he went to school for, jobs he trained for, the kind of jobs he believes deep in his spirit, in his sense of like God's design for him, he was made to do. He keeps getting promised all of these jobs again and again. These jobs are promised. And every single time he gets the call. And the call's a little bit different every time. Sometimes it's, I'm sorry, we just decided to go with someone else. I'm sorry, we just decided our budget isn't what we thought it was, and so we're not actually going to hire for the position right now. I'm sorry, as we talked about it more, the team just felt like you weren't quite the right fit for what we were looking for. And so my friend, for years, has experienced this. And I've watched him struggle again and again, and he genuinely feels lost in it and pretty alone. And he often wonders, like, where God is at in it all. He wants to do this work for God as a blessing to the church. And all of his years and school and training and his skills, they just seem worthless with every rejection. Like none of it makes any difference. And I wonder, like, have you ever felt anything like this? It doesn't have to be this, but something like it. Where there's some promise made to you, you have some hope for a particular future. Your excitement levels shoot through the roof as you anticipate a new job. Kids, as you anticipate a new toy you're going to get at Christmas. As you anticipate a new relationship, a trip somewhere, a new child, like whatever it is, you have this heightened expectation, but before you know it, like the thing is gone. It's been pulled away. And just like that, the promise seems dead. And you are left with sadness and loss and grief, or maybe just mild disappointment, but that stings too. Some of you have heard Jane and I talk through the years about the miscarriage that we experienced before Becca was born. And, you know, a positive pregnancy test, like it feels like a promise, right? That you look at it and it seems to be saying, in less than a year, like you'll be holding a baby in your arms. And so you start imagining life. You start thinking of names. You start changing your diet. You're planning your lives. And all of this excitement and expectation only to show up at a doctor's office for a routine visit to find out that the life that had been growing inside of you isn't anymore, right? That it ended, and in many ways, the dreams that were tied to that life. I imagine most of the adults in the room have experienced something like this. Kids in the room, to a lesser degree, but I hate to be the bearer of bad news, you will experience loss and sadness when your expectations are not met. This is, in a lot of ways, where our passage starts this morning. Because Jacob has been promised the whole world, his father's entire world. but he's been given none of it. Right? In fact, everything that he has been promised, he is now leaving behind because it has essentially been taken from him. Jacob is paying this huge price for deceiving his dad and stealing from his brother. And to be honest and name it, right? Our losses are not always like this. They're not the result of our actions. But in Jacob's case, he brought all of this on himself, and the loss isn't any less painful. He is busy escaping the consequences of his selfish decisions. This man who had everything promised to him now finds himself at the beginning of our story utterly alone. And he is running for his life because his brother has threatened to murder him. And he's heading off into the unknown, to a world he's never been. And it is in this moment, the worst moment of Jacob's life so far, that the God named Yahweh shows up to him. I don't know if you've ever had an experience of feeling or being completely alone and isolated. But this is Jacob's experience as it's described to us. The narrator is a bit stingy with the details, holding some of them off till later. Genesis 28:10 says, Jacob came to a certain place. And you're like, why not just tell us what place? You're going to name it later, right? But there's something about the sense that it's a certain place. At the end, we're told that Jacob's actually near a city named Luz. But the fact that he's near a city actually makes Jacob's experience all the more strange to us, because ancient cities were known for offering hospitality to traveling strangers. It was normal for a foreigner traveling through a town to be offered a bed and some food for the night. I remember the first time I went to Israel and Palestine and Jordan, and I found myself in a home, and I experienced a kind of hospitality I had never seen in my life. I didn't speak the language, but I immediately had coffee and food in my hands, and I was being offered all kinds of gifts and generosity just because I was traveling through. This was the norm. But Jacob, close to a town full of people, when he has nothing, he spends the night alone. He keeps distance from the people of this town, and it's probably because he is on the run. It's easy to forget that his brother Esau wants to kill him, and Jacob has no idea. Is Esau hunting him down? Are there wanted flyers up in the towns ready for him? Does he have spies looking for him? We have no idea. But you get the impression that Jacob doesn't think he can trust anyone. It might not be safe to interact with people. They might tell Esau where he is. And so Jacob, he comes near the town, we're told, under the cover of night. Right? He doesn't want to be seen. He doesn't want to be known. And rather than find a safe place to stay, this detail is fantastic. He just finds a rock for a pillow. Sometimes when I read the Bible, it's details like this that remind me how weak of a human I am. Like, I literally know nothing of discomfort with my bed that is just the right firmness, and my pillow that is just the right firmness, and my air temperature that is just the right coolness or warmness. It doesn't matter, whatever I want it to be. All of these things, right? I have selected and controlled for perfect comfort. Who uses a rock as a pillow? I don't understand this part of the story, and this just strikes me that I have a lot to learn about the world that these stories are taking place in. But what we do know is Jacob clearly has nothing, right? Because if he even had a bag, I've been camping, I've used a bag for a pillow. I've never used a rock. He has no tent. He has no companions. He has no meal. He has no possessions. It's just a man, his rock, and the dark that surrounds him. And that's when he somehow falls asleep. And he begins to dream. And Jacob sees, some translations describe it as a ladder, but it could also be translated as a staircase. But the important detail is that it stretches from the earth to the heavens. From the ground up into the sky. And angels, or God's messengers, are just busy going up and down it like they're doing their work. They're, moving about. But there, Jacob sees Yahweh, God, before him. And what happens next is actually incredible, especially in light of last week's passage. Like, we heard what Jacob did last week. And Yahweh comes to him. And he doesn't say, "Hey, Jacob, we need to talk about what you did back at home." He doesn't start there. Yahweh doesn't say, "Hey, Jacob, so about what you and your mom did to your dad and your brother. Ooh, not okay." He doesn't start there. Yahweh simply introduces himself, which is a hint that Jacob has not yet ever met him. But Yahweh shows up and he introduces himself and he says, "I am Yahweh, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac." And then, for reasons I can't explain, God just starts making promises to this guy who has spent his entire life grasping for stuff. But Yahweh says, "The land that you are lying on, I will give to you and your descendants. I am with you." Just consider that. Jacob, who has nothing, now he knows he at least has God with him. And God seems to think that that's enough for him. But he says, "I will protect you wherever you go." Right? Which, talk about a powerful word for a guy who's been busy, protecting himself and his future. He can open his hands. He can let go. And then he knows he's leaving. But God says, "I will bring you back here." And he says, "I will not leave you." And there's no ifs. Like, if you do this, if you apologize to your brother, there's nothing. It's just, this is what I'm going to do. Can you see what is happening? Like, the thing that Jacob was so desperate to get, the thing that he spent his entire life grasping for, that he tricked his brother for, that he deceived his own father for, none of that mattered. None of those efforts mattered or got him anything, because none of those things were Jacob's to take. None of those things were for his brother to give or his father to give. They didn't belong to Isaac or Esau or Jacob, they belonged to God, and God is the one who shows up in this place and says to him, I am your father's God, and I am the one who gives you what you have always been looking for. I will give it to you. And this changes everything for Jacob. Now, you might get to the end of the story and go, did Jacob really change enough? And Jen and I had a fun conversation this morning, like, I really wanted Jacob to not, barter with God at the end of the story and be like, yeah, if you do this. God lets Jacob start somewhere, and he's gentle with him, and we will see a change. Jacob will not be the same again. But Jacob wakes up and he says something so profound. He says, surely God is in this place. Surely Yahweh is in this place, and I did not know it. And we're told that Jacob was in awe. And he takes his rock pillow and he sets it up as a monument to mark the moment he met with God for the very first time. Jacob will refer back to this moment later. He'll come back to this place later. And so this is an important moment for him. We talked about this last week a bit. That Jacob has grown up hearing his parents talk about God. And for those of us who grow up in the church, those of you who have grown up in the church, kids, you who have grown up in our church, this is especially relevant for you because like Jacob knows that there is a God who is named Yahweh, who showed up for his grandfather Abraham, and that this same God called his father Isaac. And this God has made huge promises to the family, but up till this point, Jacob has never met him for himself. And if Jacob is going to be used by God, he needs to meet God for himself. See, because Jacob has lots of ideas about God. And, this is the way we develop ideas about what God might be like. One of those being, God doesn't show up in places like this. You can hear it at the heart of Jacob's surprise that God showed up here in the wilderness, away from the family. Surely God was in this place. See, Jacob had assumed the way that most people in the ancient world assumed, and often we do, that God is somewhere specific. That if I want to encounter God, I have to go to a particular place. That God only appears in certain kinds of places. For Jacob, maybe back home, maybe. But in the places where, proper religious things happen. But for Jacob, certainly not here, in the darkness, in the wilderness, out in the middle of nowhere, while I'm on the run, sleeping on a rock with nothing to even offer God. That was one of the big things. If a God showed up to you, you better start giving that God stuff, or you are in danger of that God being mad at you. This God doesn't ask for anything from Jacob. It just says, I have chosen you, and I will be with you. God shows up anyway. Uninvited, unearned. And I wonder if you know this experience with God, where you weren't particularly looking for God, but all of a sudden, God is showing up in a way that you cannot deny. And in the moment, you are aware that you haven't done enough. You don't deserve God showing up for you. If anything, it's the opposite. You thought you were busy repelling God, but there he is, uninvited, unearned, without waiting for Jacob to clean himself up or get his life back together first, there is God. The wilderness, no matter how lonely it feels, is not the place where God has abandoned you. I think about my friend and all of his jobs lost. I think about the time when Jane and I were experiencing such loss and sadness, this place of wilderness. We weren't abandoned. The wilderness is often the place where God wants to meet us. The wilderness is often the place where our distractions have been stripped away. Everything we've been working for, the things that we've been trying to get or hang on to are gone, and there we can finally begin to notice that God is present in this place. It's funny how many stories I've heard through the years of kids, the first time they give their life to Jesus. The story often goes that they were very bored or alone in their rooms because they were grounded or lost their screens, that they just had a unique moment of quiet stillness, boredom. And lying on their bed, God showed up for them. They sensed God's presence with them. And like Jacob, they noticed, probably with less eloquent words, surely Yahweh is in this place, and I did not know it. How awesome is this place? Adults in the room, I mean, think about your encounters with God through the years. Like, where have you been in those moments that felt the most real? I appreciate, Pastor David, how you just described often that's been in this period of wilderness for you. Many people jump straight to a hard season of life, a hospital waiting room, a long night, an unwanted move, a season where everything that you depended on, you hoped for, fell away. And I don't think that's an accident. The wilderness has this ability of stripping away the noise and the busyness and the self-sufficiency that we use without realizing it often to keep God at arm's length. And even if we're not keeping God at arm's length, it just sometimes keeps us distracted and busy and inattentive to God's presence. And when those things are gone, we often discover that God was there with us the whole time, eager to meet with us and to care for us and to guide us. Jacob didn't go into the wilderness to find God. He went there running away from the consequences of his own choices, but God met him there anyway. Knowing this, seeing this, longing for this, we often create something like a voluntary wilderness that helps us be more present and aware of God's presence. Throughout the history of the church, the season of Lent that we're in is designed to be a voluntary wilderness where we fast, we slow down, we disconnect from devices and distractions. We give things up, not because any of it is bad, but because we want to create the conditions where we might hear the things that we have just been too busy or inattentive to hear. The danger of our lives is that we are so very good at filling every quiet moment. We wake up and we immediately reach for phones. We reach for for them in the moment when we are waiting in line or we're just bored. We drive with music and podcasts. Some of you know this. I have podcasts playing in one of my ears so much. And when I do that, I notice that I don't hear as much, whether it's my family or whether it's the Lord. But we fill our afternoons, our evenings with screens. We're almost never just simply still, grounded in our rooms, lying on a bed. The season of Lent offers us some helpful questions. Like, what if, on purpose, we stopped filling all the space? What if we just let the quiet be quiet? What if the wilderness we often avoid is exactly where God has been waiting to meet us? I mean, it's funny. Jacob is not doing any kind of spiritual practice when God shows up. He is just surviving. He's exhausted, he's alone, he's out of options, but the outcome of this encounter, the stone, the promise he makes, the name that he gives the place, it shows us what it looks like to receive a wilderness encounter well. He didn't dismiss it or shrug it off. He didn't move on quickly. He stopped. He marked it, and he let it change him. Before we wrap up, I want to take a final moment to just consider the ladder in Jacob's dream. In the Gospel of John, chapter 1, Jesus is talking to a man named Nathanael. And he says something fascinating to him. He says, "Truly, truly, Nathanael, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." Oh, wait. Word for word, Jesus is describing Jacob's dream, where the angels were going up and down on the ladder. But Jesus has replaced the ladder with the Son of Man, with himself. Jesus is saying, I am the ladder. I am the connection between heaven and earth. I am the place where God and humanity meet. And he never says, okay, so now that you know the ladder, climb up me to get to heaven. No, what we find in the ladder is that God has come down to us. Jacob saw the ladder in a dream and he woke up changed. But we have something better than a dream of a ladder. Like, we have Jesus, who is the ladder, the one who came all the way down into the wilderness of our lives, into the mess of our world, and he met us here. Not when we had our lives together, not when we deserved it, but here, on whatever our hard ground is, whatever our darkness is, whatever our stone pillow is, because I know none of you sleep with stone pillows. The cross is the ultimate Bethel, the place where heaven and earth met for Jacob, the place where God showed up in the most empty and lonely moment of Jacob's life and then didn't leave. Because of that, wherever you are, in whatever wilderness you might be sleeping in right now, or might face in the future, you can say with Jacob, surely God is in this place. Surely God is in this place.